They laughed when I gave my granddaughter a handmade blanket. Next time, Margaret, just send money. Save yourself the trouble, my son-in-law joked. It felt like a punch to the heart. So I handed him an empty envelope and said, I figured I'd save myself the trouble. Then I walked away. My hands were shaking as I put on my jacket. I tried to do it slowly so they wouldn't see. Outside, the cold air hit me, but I already felt cold inside. I had spent 3 weeks making that blanket for Abby. I chose the colors to remind me of her childhood drawings. She used to love those colors. Now, it seemed she didn't. I got into my old car, a faithful old Buick. I sat there for a while before starting the engine. They didn't come after me. I let the heater run, but it didn't help. What hurt wasn't the joke itself. It was the feeling of being pushed aside. It was the feeling that my presence, my effort, my love meant nothing. I remembered a time when my gifts were welcome. Years ago, I had paid Helen's hospital bills when Abby was born. I had paid for things to keep their lights on. No one joked about a check then. It was helpful. It was needed. But now, they just wanted money. I drove home slowly. The trees were bare, and the road looked gray and sad. My small house felt like a safe harbor. I hung up my coat and sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't want. The envelope I had given them was supposed to hold a check for $500, money for Abby's spring break. But after their laughter, I had taken the check out and ripped it up. No one had noticed the envelope was empty. My hands finally stopped shaking. A quiet calm came over me. I stood up and walked to a desk in the hallway. I opened a drawer and pulled out a file labeled Helen Expenses. Inside were receipts and copies of checks from over the years. I had kept track of every time I helped. Hospital bills, car repairs, the down payment for their house, private school for Abby, camp. I had a spreadsheet, too. I had printed it a few years ago to help with my will. The total number at the bottom of the page made me pause. It was $172,430. I smiled, but it wasn't my usual soft smile. It was a new kind of smile. I closed the file and put it on the kitchen table. Then I reached for the phone. Tomorrow, I would call the bank. The phone was still warm from my hand. I just sat there, thinking. I had spent so much of my life asking for permission. Is it okay if I come by? Is it all right if I bring something? But this time, I wasn't asking. I was done asking. The spreadsheet was still open. The large number, $172,430, showed me how much I had given. It wasn't about being angry. It was about being clear. I had shown up with a handmade gift and been laughed at. Now, I would keep walking away. I found an old notebook in my closet, the one I used to use when I ran the family hardware store with my husband, George. I opened it to a new page and wrote at the top, "Resources for me." I had never written those words before. It felt strange, almost selfish. But for once, it wasn't for Helen or Jack or Abby. It was just for me. I wrote down my savings and what I would get from my pension. I made a list of things I could sell. An old treadmill, 3 sets of holiday dishes I never used. Then I added another line. I wrote, "The right to say no." I sat back and looked at those words. They were the most valuable thing I owned. A knock came at the door, but it was just the mailman. The sound made me remember a time when Helen was a little girl. I had made her a birthday dress. It was pink and puffy, and she had spun around in it for an hour. "You made this, Mommy, with your own hands," she had said, her voice full of wonder. I didn't know when that wonder had left her. I stood up and walked to my bedroom. In a small cedar box, I found the ring George gave me for our 25th wedding anniversary. It wasn't expensive, but he had chosen it with so much love. I put it on. I hadn't worn it in years. Back in the kitchen, I took a deep breath and dialed the bank's number. A kind voice answered. Good afternoon. This is Melody at Eastern Trust. How can I help you? My name is Margaret Bloom, I said, my voice steady. I'd like to cancel some automatic transfers and set up a meeting. Of course, Melody said. I can help with that. What kind of transfers? Family support, I said. Transfers I set up years ago. I no longer want to continue them. There was a small pause. I understand. I can stop them for now, and we can make it official when you come in. Thank you. I'd like to come in tomorrow morning. Melody set up the meeting. Anything else I can help with? She asked. Yes, I said. Can you tell me if I have given anyone access to my accounts? She typed for a moment. Yes, ma'am. Your daughter, Helen Carter. Would you like me to take that away? She asked. I looked out the window. The clouds had parted, and the sun shone on the neighbor's fence, the one George had helped build. Yes, I said. Take it away. After I hung up, I felt a strange quiet. It wasn't the quiet after a storm, but the quiet before one. It was the feeling of changing direction. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The room was still dark, but I felt a sense of purpose. I made toast and coffee, even though I wasn't hungry. The routine made me feel calm. I wore my gray pants and the soft cardigan George used to tease me about. He never minded when I made my own choices. By 8:45, I was sitting in the bank parking lot. I waited until 9 o'clock on the dot, then went inside. The bank was clean and bright. Melody greeted me and led me to a small office. I wasn't there to be comforted. We have stopped all the transfers you asked about, she said, sliding a folder across the desk. Would you like to review them before we permanently cancel them? I nodded. The papers showed all the money I had been giving them, the mortgage payments for Helen, the money for Abby's education, the loan payments for Jack's business that had failed. Cancel all of them, I said. All right, we need a signature on each page. I signed each one carefully. I remembered each time I had given them money, sometimes good, sometimes bad. I didn't stop. And this, Melody said, putting a new paper in front of me, taking away the power of attorney. Once you sign this, your daughter will no longer have access to any of your accounts. Good, I said. That's what I want. After I signed, Melody asked, would you like to give someone else access? I thought for a moment. No, not for now. If something happens to me, the bank can follow the rules. She nodded. You will get written proof of all these changes within a week. Is there anything else? Yes, I said. I'd like to set up a special account for my grandson. His name is Benjamin Bloom. She smiled. He's the only one who visits without asking for something. I said quietly, and I'd like to make sure he's protected, not used as a messenger or a tool. Melody didn't ask any questions. She just took notes and promised to start the process. The whole thing took just over an hour. When I left the bank, the sun was shining. On the way home, I stopped at the park where I used to take Helen. I sat on a bench and watched two little kids fighting over a toy truck. One of them gave up and went to his mother, who gave him some crackers. Children learn early what is given, what is earned, and what is owed. I stayed there for almost an hour, just watching. Back at home, I made fresh tea. The quiet felt different now. It was not empty, but full of space. I went into the spare room, which they used to call Abby's room, even though she hadn't slept there in 6 years. In the closet, I found boxes with labels in my handwriting. Winter linens, gifts. I paused at the gifts box. Inside were handmade things I had made over the years. Sweaters that were too big, scarves that were too bright, wooden toys George had helped me carve. Gifts that no one had wanted, but I couldn't throw them away. I sat on the floor and took out the blanket, the one they had laughed at. It was still soft, still beautiful in its own way. The stitches were a little crooked, but it was full of love. I folded it and put it in a bag with a few other things. I would take them to the community center next week. There were always young mothers there who had very little but knew how to say thank you. That night, I didn't cook dinner. I opened a can of soup, lit a candle, and sat at the table with my tea. I wasn't sad. I just didn't feel like putting on a show anymore. I was done with that. The phone rang once, and I let it go to voicemail. It was probably Helen, wondering why the mortgage payment hadn't gone through. I didn't listen to the message. Instead, I walked to the living room window, pulled back the curtain, and just stood there for a while. The world didn't change because I had said no, but I had said no, and that was enough for today. The next morning, I opened the drawer where I kept my important papers. It was time to stop guessing and start remembering the truth. I pulled out the folder marked Helen and Family Support and spread everything on the kitchen table. Receipts, copies of checks, and notes I had saved. The first check was for $4,000 when Jack lost his job in 2003. Just until we get back on our feet. Helen had said, I didn't ask questions. I just sent the money. Then there was the money for Abby's braces. Helen had said they might have to wait, leaving a long pause that I felt I had to fill. And I did. I kept turning the pages. Each one held a small part of a bigger story. There was the $20,000 down payment for their house, the $8,500 for a kitchen remodel. Jack had even drawn me a picture on a napkin to show me why it was needed. In total, 71 checks over 18 years. None of them were ever paid back. None of them were even mentioned again. I remembered the Christmas when I offered to buy Abby a laptop for school, and Helen told me, "It's sweet, Mom, but maybe we'll just add your gift to the family money pot." That family pot was for presents, which I paid into but never saw. I had cooked and cleaned at dinner parties while Jack talked about money, and Helen acted like she was living a perfect life. And I kept giving. I thought I was needed. I thought that giving meant I was loved. But love doesn't look away when you are embarrassed in front of your granddaughter. Love doesn't laugh when you give something you made with your own hands instead of money. I put all the papers in a new folder and labeled it Past Contributions Closed. Then I took a small notepad and wrote one sentence on it. Giving is not the same as being valued. I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore the page off and pinned it to my fridge. It was a reminder, not of what they did, but of what I had let them do. At noon, the phone rang again. I let the machine answer. Helen's voice was tight. "Hi, Mom. I saw the mortgage payment didn't go through. Is there a mix-up with the bank? Can you call me back?" She didn't say thank you. She didn't mention the last 12 years of me helping her. She just wanted an explanation. I turned the machine off. I had nothing to explain. Around 3 o'clock, I went to the hall closet and took down a box I hadn't touched in years. It was George's old cash book from the store. Helen had said it was weird to keep it around after he died. Inside were some old papers and an envelope that was yellow with age. I opened it. It was a letter George had written me on our 30th anniversary. It was a simple note. "You're the reason we have anything at all. The reason we made it this far. I don't say it enough, but I know what you've given up for this family. I see it, even when you think I don't." I sat down with that letter and let myself cry. Not for the embarrassment, not for the money, but for how long I had lived without being truly seen. George had seen me. That's why I never noticed when others stopped. By evening, I felt empty, but also clean, like something rotten had been taken out and thrown away. I made a light dinner, then opened a new page in my notebook. At the top I wrote, "Next steps." I wrote down, "Review will call lawyer, open trust for Benjamin, Inventory my things, cancel the grocery cart Helen uses, remove Helen from my insurance. Each line was a step away from them needing me, and at the bottom, I added one more, remember who you are. That night, my house settled around me like a ship on calm water. I sat by the window with my tea, watching the darkness. I didn't feel angry or proud. I just felt awake, like someone who had been holding their breath for a long time and was finally able to breathe. The phone call with the bank wasn't hard. Eastern Trust, Melody said. How can I help? It's Margaret Bloom again, I said. I'd like to finish setting up the trust account. Yes, of course, she said. I have my notes here. It's for your grandson, Benjamin Bloom. That's right, I said. I want the money to be for his education, for a house, or for emergencies. No one else can have access. Not his parents, not anyone. There was a respectful pause. We can do that, Melody said. Would you like it to be a permanent trust? Yes, I said, and I want it to start when I pass away, or earlier if I choose, but only if I say so in writing. She took care of everything and said she would send the documents to me for my signature. When we hung up, it was still before noon. The silence in the house had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, like a room where you finally open the windows. I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos. Helen in her graduation cap, Jack holding Abby as a baby, a Christmas picture from long ago. Everyone was smiling. I reached up, took one of the frames, and carried it to my bedroom. I didn't throw it away. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just tired of pretending that my life was as perfect as those pictures. In the back of my closet was an old metal file. Inside were the papers for my house, George's will, insurance papers, and my own old will from 2014. That was when Abby started high school. That was when I still believed Helen would change. I put all the papers on the dining table and called Francis, our family lawyer for years. He answered on the second ring. Margaret, he said, it's been too long. It has, I said, but I need to make some changes. He didn't ask what kind. He knew my voice too well. Can you come by on Monday? He asked. I'd rather come sooner. How about tomorrow morning? Perfect. When I hung up, I felt a sense of relief. It was like paying a big bill. I felt lighter and more ready to sleep through the night without a tight feeling in my chest. At 3 o'clock, the mail came. In between the junk mail was a pale blue envelope with Abby's handwriting on it. Inside was a thank you card. Dear Grandma, it started. Thanks for the blanket. I didn't mean to seem rude. It's actually really nice and warm. Sorry about the other night. Love, Abby. There was no mention of Jack's joke. No apology for her giggle, but it was a note all the same. I folded it gently and put it in the cedar box in my room. I wasn't going to write back, but I wasn't throwing her away either. She was still young. She was still learning what it means to truly see people. By evening, the house was quiet again. The wind was soft. The phone rang once, and I let it go. A message from Helen came through. Mom, I don't know what's going on, but I need you to call me. There's something wrong with the accounts, and Abby said you seemed upset at dinner. Can we talk? Please. Her voice held a note I hadn't heard in years. Not anger, not pride, but uncertainty. I didn't delete the message, but I didn't call her back either. Instead, I went into the kitchen and took out my best teacup, the one with the gold rim that I always saved for guests. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, drinking it slowly. This cup was for me. It always had been. That evening, for the first time in years, I didn't check the locks twice before bed. I didn't make a list for tomorrow. I didn't reach for the sleeping pills. I simply turned off the light, got under my quilt, and closed my eyes. And I slept. A deep, clean sleep. The kind that doesn't come often when you're older not because of your body, but because of all the things you were supposed to do. Regret, duty, the endless list of things you were supposed to put up with. In the morning, I sat in the kitchen with a bowl of oatmeal and honey, listening to the soft sound of the kettle. There was no worry in my chest, no fear of a knock on the door or a phone call that would pull me back into the role I had finally walked away from. Instead, there was a feeling of calm and quiet, a feeling of freedom. I picked up the newspaper and actually read it, not just glanced at the headlines. The sun came through the window. Dust motes danced in the air. The phone stayed silent all morning. Around lunchtime, I baked a peach cobbler, not because someone was visiting, not for a holiday, not because Abby had asked for it. I baked it because I wanted to. I took out my good china and served a piece on the plate with the tiny purple rim, the one Helen had always said was too delicate for guests. Delicate, maybe, but strong enough for me. While the cobbler cooled, I went back to my notebook. On a new page, I wrote in big letters, things I've done without thanks. I wasn't keeping track to be angry. I was writing it to remind myself, to prove that I had lived before the guilt, that I had done more than just fix problems. I wrote, paid for Helen's wedding in full, $18,000. Took care of Abby for 3 summers while they traveled. Paid for 3 car repairs. Sat with George through every chemo treatment. Ran the store alone for 2.5 years. Made Helen's first suit for her job interview. Went to the school to defend Abby when she was wrongly suspended. Paid for Jack's mother's funeral when they couldn't afford it. Never asked for a penny back. The list filled 2 pages. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in a file labeled Legacy. I didn't need thanks, but I would not let myself forget. In the afternoon, I walked to the mailbox. The sky had turned a soft gray. I wrapped a scarf around my neck and felt a small pain in my hip as I stepped off the porch. An old pain, but now it was a little duller, something I could handle. The mail was light, a few ads, and a letter from the bank. It was a letter confirming the creation of Benjamin's trust. I stood in the driveway, reading it carefully. Everything was just as I had asked. The rules, the terms, the designated reasons for the money to be used. My signature was printed clearly at the bottom. Not Helen's, not Jack's, mine. Inside the house, I put the letter in my active folder and made myself another cup of tea. The clock said 3:12. By this time, I used to be getting dinner ready. I would be thinking about when Jack would get home, if Helen would bring groceries, what Abby might eat. But today, I made a sandwich for myself. Toasted bread, a single slice of cheese. No show, no pressure. As I sat at the table, my eyes went to the corner of the room where my sewing machine sat. I hadn't touched it since Abby was 15. She used to sit beside me on Saturdays, watching with her big, patient eyes. I stood up, walked over, and took off the dust cover. The machine was still smooth under my fingers, familiar, ready, and so was I. It was Benjamin who knocked on my door that Saturday morning. No warning, no text, just that quiet, almost shy knock I would know anywhere. I was in the garden, pulling weeds, when I heard it. He was taller than the last time I saw him, 17 years old, thin in that way boys are before they become men. His hoodie was too big, his shoes were dirty, but his smile was real. "Hi, Grandma." "Ben," I said, brushing dirt off my gloves. "Come in, sweetheart." He followed me to the kitchen. I washed my hands and put the kettle on. He didn't say much at first, just sat at the table like he had done 100 times before, playing with the chipped edge of a placemat. I was in the neighborhood. He said, finally, a little too casually. I nodded. "Is that why you brought my favorite lemon cookies?" He laughed, taking the box out of his backpack. "Okay, you got me." I put the cookies on a plate and poured the tea. We didn't talk right away. We never had to. That was the thing about Benjamin. He never filled a silence just to fill it. He let it be. After a while, he said, "Mom's freaking out." I didn't even blink. I added a little honey to my tea. She said something about the bank. Jack was pacing. "They think something's wrong with your accounts, but you're not calling them back." "They're right," I said simply. Something changed. He looked at me, waiting. I canceled everything, Ben. Every automatic payment. Every quiet little help system I had kept running like an invisible hand under their house. His mouth opened just a little. All of it. All of it. He leaned back in his chair, looking around the room as if he were trying to understand the news from the wallpaper. "I don't blame you," he said, finally. His voice was low but steady. "They talk about you like you're a resource, not a person. They care in their way," I said, "but their way isn't mine anymore." He nodded. "I never laughed at the blanket," he added suddenly. "I didn't know you made it until Abby said something later. I thought it was from a store. It was that good." My throat felt tight, but I didn't cry. Instead, I stood up, went to the hallway, and came back with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "This is for you." He looked surprised, like he wasn't sure if he should open it. "It's okay. Go ahead." He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a scarf, a dark blue color with a dark red stripe, like the ones George used to wear. "You remembered my favorite colors," he said softly. Of course I did. He held it like it was something precious. We sat there for a while longer, talking about school and the college applications he hadn't told his parents about yet. He told me about a girl named Nina who liked old movies and never made fun of his stutter. Before he left, he gave me a tight hug. Not a polite hug, a real one. His arms were around my shoulders, and his chin rested near my head. "You're the only person who listens," he whispered. And then he was gone, walking down the path in that way that boys walk, half running, before they forget how to be gentle. I stood by the window until he turned the corner. Then I sat down, took a deep breath, and felt something in my chest open up. Not sadness, not pride, just relief. Like I hadn't failed after all. That night, I couldn't sleep. But it wasn't from worry. No, those nights were behind me. It was from something else. A feeling of energy, the kind that comes when something inside you is changing. I turned on the lamp and sat at the desk in my bedroom. For years, that desk had just been a place for bills and coupons. Tonight, it felt different. I took out a piece of good paper and my favorite pen and started to write, but not to them, to myself. "Dear Margaret," I wrote, "it's about time someone asked you how you're doing. You have spent over 40 years showing up. As a wife, a mother, a grandmother. You cooked meals no one thanked you for. You paid bills they never saw. You kept quiet as if it was your job. You thought being good meant being needed. You thought being loved meant being useful. You were wrong. You are not a transaction. You are not just a background person in their lives. You are not just a grandmother. You are the woman who built a home from hard work and patience. The woman who stayed up all night making dresses and fixing problems. The woman who went unnoticed not because she was invisible, but because she was always there, always reliable. And now you are done being quiet. You are allowed to ask for respect. Not for favors, not for money. Just because you are still here, and that is enough. You are allowed to stop giving. You are allowed to keep what is yours. You are allowed to be selfish with your peace. You are allowed to take up space. Love yourself. I put the letter to the side and looked at it for a long time. Then I folded it into 3 parts, put it in an envelope, and tucked it in the drawer under my socks. I didn't need anyone to read it. It had already done its job. By morning, the feeling of energy was gone. My body moved a little slower, which always happens after a night with little sleep. But my mind was clear. I spent the afternoon sorting books. Not for anyone else, just for me. I wanted to make space on the shelves for books I actually wanted to read again. I put the cookbooks in a box. The old parenting guides, long useless, went into the garage. On the top shelf, I put the old poetry books George had given me before we were married. They had been collecting dust behind the tax papers. It was time to bring them back. That evening, I made real soup, not from a can. Lentils, carrots, and rosemary, the kind that takes time but doesn't ask for anything else. When I sat down to eat, the house was quiet in a new way. Not empty, not echoing, just still. The phone rang twice that night. I didn't answer. I let them sit in the silence now. I let them wonder. This time, the silence belonged to me. They arrived without calling first. Of course they did. It was a little after 11 on a Tuesday morning. I was outside trimming the flowers when I heard a car pull up. It was Helen's big car, and Jack got out behind her. She didn't even knock. She just opened the gate and walked up the path like it was still her house, still her time, still her rules. I stayed by the bush, holding my trimming scissors, and waited. "Mom," she said, her voice flat but urgent, "we need to talk." Jack stood behind her, his face serious. No smile, no warmth, just tension. I pointed to the porch. "I'm listening." They looked at each other. Helen wanted to come inside. She expected it, but I didn't move toward the door. I stayed where I was, among the plant clippings and soil. "Can we go inside?" she asked. No. The word surprised even me. Not because I didn't mean it, I did, but because it came so easily. No apology, no soft words, just no. Helen crossed her arms. "Fine." She let out a sharp breath. "There's a problem with the mortgage. The bank says the payments have been canceled." "They have," I said. "Well, why?" Jack stepped forward. "You could have at least told us first." I looked at him. "You've had notice for 20 years. He blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "that every time you asked for help, I gave it. Every time you didn't ask, but left an opening for me to offer, I filled it. The mortgage, the education, the groceries, the trips, the car repairs, the house updates, the school fees, the interest on Jack's failed business. That wasn't a failure. He started, but Helen cut him off. "Mom, if something was wrong, you should have said something, not just taken everything away." "Wrong," I repeated, like being laughed at for giving a handmade gift, like hearing, "Just send money next time," from your husband while my granddaughter giggles. Helen's face turned red. It was a joke. "No," I said, putting the scissors on the ground. "It was a moment of truth. For you and for me." She looked at Jack, then back at me. Her voice became soft, like she was reading from a script. "We're just worried about you, Mom. Are you sure you're okay? You're making big decisions all of a sudden." "I am perfectly able to make my own decisions," I said. "I've made thousands for you." Quietly, without thanks, without asking for anything in return. Helen's mouth became a thin line. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's finally fair." Jack folded his arms. "So what? You're cutting us off after all these years." "I'm ending a contract," I said. "One none of us signed, but all of you depended on." Helen took a step closer, her voice angry now. "You're going to punish us by what? Keeping your money? Giving it all to Ben, instead?" I didn't answer that. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't owe her one. She saw it in my eyes. "You've lost your mind," she whispered, shaking her head. This is mean." "No," I said softly. "This is self-respect." For the first time in the conversation, they had nothing to say. The wind blew. Jack cleared his throat. "You'll regret this." I looked right at him. "I already regret. what I gave without any limits. That ends now. Helen's face became hard. She grabbed Jack's sleeve. Come on. They turned and walked back to the car. Their steps were stiffer than when they arrived. I didn't watch them drive away. Instead, I bent down and picked up the fallen clippings one by one and put them in the bin. The same way I used to clear the table after they left on Sundays, with their half-eaten plates and their voices still in the air. But now, the cleaning was for me. This time, I chose what stayed. Francis greeted me at his office door with a half-smile. "Margaret," he said, holding out a hand, "you look determined." "I am." His office smelled of wood and old paper. The place hadn't changed since the 90s. The same old blinds, the same framed degrees, the same dusty photo of his dog on the windowsill. I sat down across from him and put the folder on his desk. "I'm ready to change my will." Francis nodded, already pulling out the right papers. "All right, I have your old version here. Everything is still going to Helen and Abby, correct?" "No," I said, "not anymore." He paused. "All right, who are the new people to get your money?" I looked him in the eye. "Benjamin and a few places I care about. A shelter, a library, the historical society if they want it." He didn't show any emotion. He just started writing. "No conditions," I added. "No letters of apology needed. But no access for Helen. Not through him. Not at all." Francis nodded. "Understood. And the house? Leave it to Ben if he wants it. If not, it can be sold. But I don't want Jack's name anywhere near it, not even in a conversation." Francis allowed himself a small smile. "Noted." We went through the paperwork line by line. It wasn't emotional. It was just a process, like cleaning out your house to get rid of old junk. When we finished, he handed me the pen. "Are you sure?" he asked, as lawyers always must. I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." I signed. He signed. That was it. My whole life rewritten in 20 pages and 2 signatures. As I stood up to leave, Francis reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. "I kept something," he said, "a letter George left with the first version of your will before he got sick. He asked me to give it to you someday if I felt the time was right." I took it slowly, my hands suddenly shaking. At home, I didn't open it right away. I made tea first. I sat in the same chair I had sat in to comfort George when his pain was bad and words were gone. And then, carefully, I opened the envelope. "Maggie," it began. Only he called me that. If you're reading this, you've probably done something brave. Something no one else noticed, but I knew you would. You always did what was hard. I hope you're doing it again. Not for me, not for them, but for you. I didn't finish the letter in one go. I folded it, put it beside my tea, and sat very still. For the first time in many years, I felt like I had someone with me again, not to save me, just to be there. That night, I slept without a single dream. And when I woke the next morning, the sun was shining, a quiet sign of time moving on, but also of something better. A life finally starting to find its balance. Lorraine showed up with lemon bars, and that look on her face. The one that meant she had heard something. She didn't wait to be invited in. She just walked across the doorstep, like she had every right, which she did. We had been friends since 1978. She caught me crying in the grocery store, once over a jar of pickles. George had forgotten our anniversary, and I hadn't said a word to anyone. But Lorraine saw it anyway. She always did. I heard Helen came by. She said now, putting the food on the table. She did. And you didn't let her in. She smiled then, not in a mean way, just in a way that showed she was happy for me, like something that should have happened a long time ago finally had. Well, thank goodness. We sat in the kitchen, the clock ticking quietly above the stove. I poured tea. She cut the lemon bars. It was simple. Just two older women sharing a quiet moment after a storm. "You look better," she said after a while. "Do I?" "Less worried. More you?" I shrugged. "I don't know who that is anymore." She sipped her tea. "Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe you get to decide now." We didn't talk about money. Lorraine had always kept her opinions about Jack and Helen to herself until now. "You know," she said, "I was always afraid you'd never say no, that you'd die with a polite smile and an empty bank account." "I might have," I said, "but something broke." "No," she corrected. "Something healed." I nodded slowly. That was closer to the truth. We talked about normal things after that. A new neighbor, a pothole near the store, the bird feeder she hung last week. It felt good to talk, without having to explain myself, without being pulled back into a role I didn't want anymore. When she left, I stood on the porch and watched her walk away. She turned back once. "Don't answer if they call," she said. "Let them clean up their own mess." I smiled. "You think I've come this far to go soft now?" She winked. "Just checking." After she left, I went back inside and opened the sewing cabinet. The dark blue fabric was still there from last week. I ran my hand over it slowly. I didn't want to make anything for them anymore. But I did want to make something for me. A new curtain for the kitchen, a blanket for the porch chair, maybe even a dress, one with deep pockets and no apologies. I wasn't sewing for approval. I was sewing because my hands still knew how to make something whole. The garden was waking up. First the small, stubborn flowers, then the yellow ones, and the other colorful ones that never grew exactly where I had planted them. I spent my mornings outside now, with gloves on, my knees in the dirt, my back hurting just enough to remind me I was still here, not useful to anyone, just here, living. I had cleaned out the dead plants, cut back the roses, and turned the soil. It was quiet work, and it suited me. Plants don't ask for explanations. They don't need you to say why you have boundaries. They grow where there is light, and they stop when there isn't. I was learning to do the same. The house had changed with the season, too. I opened the windows more, took down the heavy curtains, and let the air move through the rooms. I didn't realize how long it had smelled like other people, like Sunday dinners I didn't want to cook, like perfumes I didn't wear, like worry left in the cushions. Now it smelled like lemon oil, soil, and something clean. I moved slowly on purpose. I moved books, cleaned out the pantry, and gave away things I no longer needed. Helen's wedding china, the extra blender I kept just in case, Abby's old shoes from her dance recitals. Let them start their own collections. One morning I painted the porch chair, the same one George used to sit in. I chose a soft, light blue color. When it was dry, I sat in it with my tea, watching the wind in the trees. The sound of the leaves was small, but it was enough. Across the fence, a neighbor's boy rode by on his bike. He waved. I waved back. No one asked for anything. That afternoon, I baked a rhubarb pie just for me, the way my mother made it. I ate the first piece in silence, the second with jazz music playing on the radio, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I danced just a little, right there in the kitchen, without shoes on. It was a dance for myself, not for show, but for life. That evening, I took out George's letter again and read the last line slowly. You don't have to be the strong one all the time, but when you are, don't say sorry for it. I folded the paper and placed it beside my will. Then I stood at the window and watched the first stars appear. I wasn't lonely. I wasn't waiting. I was still, and in that stillness something was blooming, quiet, steady, and all mine. It was Benjamin who called. Not a text, not an email. A real call, the kind where you have to sit down and be present. I was in the garden planting herbs. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I wiped my hands on my apron and answered. "Hi, Grandma," he said. His voice was quieter than usual. Not sad, just softer. "Hi, love. I just wanted to check on you." I smiled. "That's new." He laughed. "Yeah, well, things feel different lately." I sat on the porch steps, the phone to my ear, the sun warm on my neck. "What's going on?" "They're losing it," he said plainly. "Mom and Jack, ever since the bank stuff, the trust, your will, they act like you did something wrong. They're not used to hearing, 'No,'" I said. "No," he agreed. "They're not." There was a pause. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said. "I didn't want to be in the middle." "You're not in the middle, Ben. You're on your own path. They're just mad that it doesn't bend to theirs." He was quiet for a while. "I think I want to move out." My heart didn't jump with worry like it once would have. I just breathed in and out, calm and steady. "Do you have a place in mind?" "There's a place near my school. It's nothing special. A friend's brother is leaving it. It's small, but it's mine. And you can afford it." "Yeah," he said, then added quietly, with the trust, "Yeah." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. "Mom said I was being used," he said, almost laughing. "She said you were trying to turn me against her." "And what did you say?" "I said you were the only person who ever told me I didn't owe anyone my peace." My throat felt tight. "Ben," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it, "whatever you choose, choose it because it makes you feel strong, not guilty." "I will." He paused again. "Can I come by?" "Always." He came that evening with a small box of books and a lamp and asked if he could leave them for now. I showed him the guest room, now clean and simple, waiting for him. We sat on the porch and watched the stars come out. "I think Mom's afraid," he said, "not just of the money, but of what you changed. Like, if you can stop giving, maybe she never deserved it." I looked out at the quiet street. "Fear makes people selfish," I said, "but healing makes them honest." "Do you think she'll change?" "I think," I said, "she'll have to decide whether silence is easier than growth." He stayed for pie and took a second piece home. When he left, he hugged me the way he always did, with 2 arms, not in a hurry, without pretending. After he drove off, I stood at the porch rail, one hand on the painted wood. The stars looked a little brighter that night, not because the sky had changed, but because I had. The next envelope was thicker. No return address, just my name in Helen's handwriting. It looked rushed and messy, like she had held the pen too tight. I didn't open it right away. I put it on the table next to my tea and went about my morning. I watered the basil, swept the porch, and folded the sheets in the hall closet. I wasn't avoiding it out of fear. I just didn't feel I had to rush. At noon, I sat down, opened it, and unfolded the letter. It wasn't long. Helen was never a person who used many words when she wasn't asking for something. "Mom," it began, "I don't know what's wrong with you. I keep trying to understand, but I can't. I feel like you're punishing me for something I don't remember doing. I'm your daughter. I've tried. I've always tried. You just took everything away without telling us, without explaining. It feels mean. We needed your help. Maybe you don't think that's love, but it was never meant to hurt you. We just thought you wanted to help, like you always did. I don't know who this new version of you is, but I hope you'll want to talk at some point." I read it once, then again. Then I folded it neatly and put it back in the envelope. She wasn't sorry. She was surprised. There is a difference. The feeling of guilt she had was real, but it wasn't about me. It was about her losing control of a system she didn't even know she depended on. The system where I always fixed things, paid the bills, made the peace, and took all the bad feelings. I wasn't angry, just clear. Later that afternoon, I wrote my answer. Short, to the point. "Helen, you weren't punished. You were uninvited. There's a difference. I gave what I gave because I wanted to, and then one day I didn't. That day came quietly, but it came. This isn't revenge. It's freedom. Take care of your family. Learn what you can live without. You'll be fine. Love, Mom. I sealed the envelope, wrote her name on it, and walked it to the mailbox. No return address, no extra words, just the truth. By evening, the house felt lighter again. I lit a candle and read from the old poetry book George gave me before things got so loud. The words filled the room like music. Just before bed, I passed by the mirror in the hallway. I stopped and looked at myself, not to fix my hair or check for wrinkles, just to see myself. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't see someone just trying to get by. I saw someone home. The days that followed were quiet, not empty, just quiet. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I stopped looking out the window when a car passed. I stopped wondering when or if they would come around. They might not. Either way, it wouldn't change me. I spent my mornings in the garden, my afternoons with thread and fabric. The blanket on the living room chair was almost done now. Deep blues, earthy greens, the kind of pattern you don't notice right away, but can't stop thinking about once you do. I wasn't making it for anyone else. Not this time. This one was mine. Benjamin visited every few days. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Sometimes he brought cookies. Sometimes books. Sometimes we didn't talk much at all. We just sat side by side on the porch. Two quiet people, letting the world be what it was. He was starting to look older. Not just in his face, but in his eyes. There was something there now. A sense of purpose. A plan. You know, he said once, if I ever have a daughter, I'll name her after you. I smiled, brushing dirt from my hands. Don't give her a name like Margaret. He laughed. I mean the spirit, not the name. He understood more than most people twice his age. One afternoon, I took out the old photo albums, the real ones, not the digital copies they all forgot about. I laid them out on the table and started sorting. What to keep, what to give away, what to let go of. I kept the ones that mattered, the ones where the smiles were real, the eyes weren't tired, the moments weren't fake. The rest I put away, not in anger, but in honesty. Some memories aren't worth holding on to. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a slice of peach pie and a single candle lit, not to set a mood, but to remember. George would have liked this part of me, this version, the one who no longer asked for permission to be herself. I could almost hear his voice. Took you long enough, Maggie. He was right. But I got here, and that counts. The next day, I finished the blanket, folded it neatly, and placed it on the chair. Then I walked to the window, looked out over the yard, and let myself feel everything. The sadness of years wasted, the power of years taken back, the steady, quiet grace of still being here. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose your limits. You can choose where the giving stops and where you begin. You can choose what to carry and what to finally put down. And if you're reading this and wondering if it's too late to change, to pull back, to say no, it's not. Not if you're still breathing. Not if your hands still work. Not if you can still stand at the window and say, this space is mine now. So take it. Own it. And when you're ready, not a minute before, start again, but this time for you.